This is my special topics presentation for Sociology 354 by Alexia Vargas, titled, How Does Cohabitation Affect Married Couples Over Time? Cohabitation can be defined as the sharing of a household by unmarried persons who have a romantic sexual relationship, as noted in Sociology 354 lecture. It's important to note that overall, research for cohabitation is primarily heteronormative and not inclusive of LGBTQ marriages and relationships. It's lacking diversity and is therefore unknown if this data can be applied to couples universally. I believe that cohabitation is important to study because in terms of research, substantial data for this is limited and goes back just about 5 decades, where cohabitation is quickly growing to what seems to look like the majority of couples in the US. I argue that cohabitation has a negative impact on relationships, with a few varying factors shown on the following slides. First and foremost, I want to describe a few of the methods used in this research. My first academic journal used a very mathematical approach, using a series of regression models to measure the time of union formation, meaning marriage, to dissolution, aka divorce. My second academic journal was a meta-analysis, meaning that their studies were designed to use the results of previous research to derive their conclusions. This was eventually narrowed down to 16 independent studies assessing marital stability. Their sample size ended up with a grand total of 53,230 people. My final academic journal was a prospective study, meaning that the people were interviewed progressively over time, meaning they were interviewed biannually from 1979 to 2008. This study was restricted to women in their first marriage, meaning that any women who had been in more than one marriage at the time were not allowed to participate in the study. The final sample was 2,898 women. As noted earlier, research on cohabitation really doesn't gain significant traction until the 1980s. The significant lack in representation between diverse groups, such as the members of the LGBTQ community, can be directly tied to the fact that same-sex marriage has only been nationally legalized since 2015, and therefore omits them from the possibility of being included or even considered at all for these studies. In the past 5 decades, the number of cohabitors has increased 10 times from its original data collected in its earlier years. This is significant because according to Pew Research, as the number of married couples drops, the number of cohabiting couples continues to increase. This highlights the relevance in studying this topic. Overall, 44% of couples have cohabited at some time, and 64% said they thought of cohabitation as a step towards marriage. I argue that it isn't cohabitation itself that dwindles marriage quality and stability, but rather various present characteristics in the relationship that come when cohabiting with a partner. Examples of this are such as non-traditional values, the presence of marriage-specific capital easing couples into cohabitation, and the overall attitudes towards the relationship. According to the National Institutes of Health, those who cohabit tend to be less religious. It's also noted that attendance to religious service can be associated with greater marriage quality and stability. This means that marriage dissatisfaction can be explained by a lack of institution in those who do not attend religious services with their partner, as religion is a common ground where couples can follow and base their core values together. Less traditional ideals and poor relationship skills. This can lead to less confidence in the relationship's future versus those non-cohabiting couples. The decision of marriage can also be dictated on what is in place economically for individuals married versus non-married, which takes away from the traditional mindset of marriage, where the primary goal was always to start a family. Marriage capital. I like to describe marriage capital as specific obtainment typically gained through a marriage. The concept of relationship inertia describes the gradual slide into a cohabiting living arrangement versus an explicit decision between both partners. This means that not as much thought is being put into this arrangement as it would be for someone deciding to marry. Marriage capital and possessions collected in a time of dating facilitate this. One significant example of this would be children. Because of the way society used to work, it was only ever acceptable for married individuals to have children. Otherwise, you would get stigmatized from everyone in the community, including your own family. Now, you don't have to be married to have kids, and you don't have to be married to live together. With children, it's important to note that the absence of children generally leads to frequent marriage communication. What this says for non-married couples can suggest less frequent communication between a pair with children. Children will be affected socially, psychologically, and academically due to the quality and stability of the romantic union of their parents. One of the biggest factors, I believe, that goes into the outcome of cohabitation is the attitude and mindset towards the relationship. Cohabitation, for many, can be viewed as an alternative to marriage outside of legal confines. It's like marriage, but without the legal strings attached. An alternative to singlehood. This would allow each person to progress in the relationship without assuming the relationship's stability. And finally, a step in the mate selection process. This mindset means that people are going to be looking for those outlying qualities they don't want in a partner and scrutinizing them to a larger degree to make their long-run quote-unquote decision on their potential life partner. Simply just knowing that it's not a permanent arrangement will reduce the investment, whether it's a conscious decision or not, ultimately hurting their marriage quality and/or threshold for tolerance and dissolution. These couples are more likely to be stigmatized from the start. They may not receive as much social support as married couples would, and may feel awkward in deciding how to address their partner to others or determining whether they are family or not. Moving on from academic research, I will now shift into what the media says about cohabitation and its effects. The Washington Post has an article titled, "Why Cohabitation is Worse Than Divorce for Kids." The title itself makes the bold claim that cohabitation is worse for a child than a parental divorce due to cohabitation being one of the biggest sources of instability in families overall. Cohabiting couples who have children tend to be less educated, poorer, and less committed to their relationship than couples who have children in marriages. Families are significantly more likely to suffer from depression, delinquency, and drug use. One of the most significant factors is that children in cohabiting step-families do much worse than children in single-parent families socially. This suggests that it's not merely the absence of married parents in a child's life that negatively affects them, but rather the untraditional and uncommitted relationship of their parents, putting them at the mercy of these social risk factors. With this institution in place throughout their development, children are more likely to end up cohabiting themselves later in life. Overall, the most striking differences between cohabiting and married families is stability. Moving on to the final article, The Atlantic describes age as being an additional key component in whether divorce rates will be more common or not. Instead of studying correlation, the age at which a marriage commitment was made was analyzed. What was found was that the longer couples waited to make the serious commitment, the better the chances for their marital success. Research shows that those who waited until about age 23 saw only a 30% divorce rate, which is half the divorce rate compared to 18-year-olds, due to their acquainted financial independence and settled adult life. The media brings age and maturity into the equation, which can be very similarly tied with the academic findings that cohabiting couples' attitudes play a large role in their dissatisfaction. So, is the media correct, and does it align with the academic research we have today? I can strongly support that both the media and academic research agree that cohabitation has a negative correlational effect on marriage quality, stability, and family. There is a present consensus that children with cohabiting parents will have lower outcomes in life socially, psychologically, and academically due to the instability of the parents' model relationship. With this, I argue that media and academic research can go hand in hand with the data that we have now, due to the fact that this research is limited to just a couple of generations. I interpret that the media provides a more explanatory approach as to how a family will be affected, as opposed to what correlation is present. I argue that this is the media's attempt to discourage individuals from cohabiting in their earlier lifetime. Throughout my research, it's worth noting that the normalization and increase in cohabitation can allude that past data has become outdated and should be revisited in depth to study the way our current generation is affected by these circumstances in the future to come.